Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my rant on the 2018 action film Skyscraper. More like Shit Scraper, because this film is the cinematic equivalent of that shitty ring in your toilet that you have to scrape off with a scrubber, uh, and it stinks just as bad. This is a film that I picked up for dirt cheap just to see if it could be a fun disaster movie, because this in a lot of ways is intended to be Die Hard meets the Towering Inferno. So it's very similar in its structure to an Irwin Allen disaster movie. And I enjoy Irwin Allen disaster movies. So I thought, okay, maybe this might have potential. You've got The Rock. He's playing a character that's different than the norm because he's not a superhuman guy. He has a disability, and there's this high-tech skyscraper, and there are these terrorists, and yeah, the trailer wasn't the best, but there have been instances where films have had trailers that didn't really impress me, and then I saw the film and I really enjoyed it, like Dread or White House Down. So I thought maybe Skyscraper could be one of those films. Maybe at the very least it could be a fun action movie with The Rock. No. Instead, it was mostly a boring slog to sit through. It barely had any fucking action in it. And the most exciting and interesting thing about the movie was the skyscraper itself. Which, I guess, the film isn't false advertising in that regard. But that's a really lame positive when it comes to like the biggest positive for your action film is what is essentially window dressing. Just expensive, time consuming window dressing. The film is directed by Rawson Marshall Thurber, and this is a guy who directed nothing but comedies for the most part before Skyscraper, like Where the Millers, Dodgeball. He did Central Intelligence with The Rock and Kevin Hart, which I did enjoy, which I did like, but I'm not going to sit here and say the action sequences were amazing in that film, but they were Oscar worthy compared to the action sequences in this. I mean, the action sequences in that movie were actually somewhat adrenaline inducing, especially some of the um, action set pieces in the middle of the film, like the sequence in the office building, for instance. This, I can't even remember any of the fucking action. That's how little of it there is, and that's how little of an impression the action left on me. And it's an action film that stars The Rock. I mean, what a waste of his talents. What a waste of space. 50 stories of waste. Might as well be human waste. And I don't understand why anyone would say this is exhilarating. Like, Richard Lawson, really? Exhilarating? Like, this film of all things. Exhilarating. I've taken more exhilarating dumps in my life than this movie. So, yeah, the direction, it's nothing special. And a lot of times the film really disappoints when it comes to the directing, because so many of the scenes don't really have the height or the size or the scope that you want for a film like this. It feels very small. It doesn't feel very epic. It doesn't feel very grand. A lot of the direction seems very static, much like a skyscraper that's just sitting there. Just sitting there, going straight up. There's not really a lot of variety with the skyscraper. And it's intended to be quite rigid, but that's not what you really want from directing in an action film featuring a skyscraper. You want something that's more fluid. You want something that takes a little more risks in terms of the way that the camera moves or the way that it showcases different angles or different point of views. And that never really happens for the most part, except for maybe a few exceptions. Most of the time, though, it's very stock, it's very standard, and it's very rigid. And the script sucks. The screenplay is just one of those scripts that is just lazy, uninspired. The characters are poorly developed. I guess it was also written by Rawson Marshall Thurber. Why does this guy think that he's a dual threat? I can direct and I can also write. Like, you can barely even fucking direct. Well, who the hell are you to think that you can actually handle both jobs? Dude, you're not it. You're not the kind of director who is talented enough to do that. This easily needed another writer to punch up the dialogue, to take certain things out and trim them down. There are so many fucking characters in this. You've got The Rock and his family. You've got the rich Asian billionaire guy who is the man whose dream it was to create this skyscraper. And you have his aide. Then you have The Rock as a friend of his who might as well have turncoat stamped on his forehead because it's that obvious that this character is going to turn on The Rock. And you have the bad guy and his team. Just too many fucking characters. And I guess you could argue that Die Hard is similar because Die Hard does have a lot of characters. But Die Hard is a script that actually feels like those characters are fleshed out, at least in a decent enough fashion. Like, not all of them are fleshed out completely, but at least it seems like they are there for a reason, and they have some legitimate, memorable moments. They have a lot of time in order to showcase their charisma, or for the actors to really shine, and that's not really the case here with the screenplay for Skyscraper. I mean, the film even opens up in a very boring fashion with an origin story for The Rock's character. And yeah, I know it's Dwayne Johnson, but you know what? He's The Rock. I'm sorry. I'm not going to call him Dwayne Johnson. I don't care what he thinks. He will always be The Rock to me. That's how he made his name. It was as The Rock in WWE and WWF. So his character Will, he was an FBI hostage rescuer guy, and something goes wrong during one of the events where he's trying to save some hostages, and he gets blown up, and that's why he's an amputee. That's why he lost a leg. The idea of having The Rock play someone who's wounded, someone who is not physically as capable as some of the other characters that he's portrayed in the past, is a really interesting concept. The problem is, this film just completely does not at any point make The Rock appear to be vulnerable. I mean, he's hopping around on one leg at one point and still kicking ass. And at that point, it just becomes ludicrous and silly and honestly pretty dumb. And maybe the intent was, okay, an inspiring bit of heroism, or I'm trying to think of the right word, or a fantasy for people who are in the same situation, people who are amputees. And I'm like, okay, all right, but I would think a lot of amputees in the audience would look at this and be like, this is bullshit. Like, I'm not doing all that. I'm not running at full speed and jumping to another building. Like, what the hell is that shit? I'm not Superman. I'm not I'm not the $6 million man because I have a bionic leg. Like, it's not even a bionic leg. Like, I'm not. I don't have superpowers. So it just felt like it was completely unnecessary. It just felt like it was just there to be more of a character trait, to differentiate this character from other characters that The Rock has played. But it didn't really feel like something that felt that integral to his character, despite the fact that it's trying to really showcase, oh, he's wounded and now got to now he's really gonna be in a tough situation because he's got one leg, or he's not as strong or not as capable as some other people or as he used to be. So if he's gonna save his family and stop these terrorists, he's got to use his wits. He's got to really think things through. No, there's really not any of that. He's still being pretty much The Rock, superhuman, larger than life, badass, but with a missing leg. That's really all that it is, and you're just like, what a missed opportunity. And it seems like they try to have some moments where he's using his smarts, but it's in a way that just feels very forced, or just doesn't really tie into this character that well. And it doesn't help either that The Rock's performance in this is just so bad, so boring. His performance is about as boring and uh, unmemorable as an actual rock or a piece of a skyscraper. And the whole plot involves this high-tech skyscraper, and The Rock's a security expert, and there's this guy who worked with the Asian billionaire guy in the past, and he wants revenge, steals some tablet, causes a fire in the skyscraper. And this is a skyscraper that, I mean, there's some interesting ideas, there's some interesting visuals, like there's a whole garden inside the skyscraper. That was different. Um, and there's a pretty cool bit of technology where in one of these spots on the skyscraper, in fact, it's like this, I think they call it the eye or something. It's like this round sphere, and inside of it is this technology that reflects all these different HD screens and video screens, and by reflect, I mean what it does is I think it uses some mirrors as well as these video screens to create the illusion that you're surrounded completely by a certain environment. So it'll start showing a city, and then it's like you're floating in the middle of the city. I thought that was a cool idea, and they try to do some fun stuff with it in the climax with, oh, you think that The Rock is in one place, but he's actually in another. But it just comes across as something that has been done better in other films. And it's fitting because that's really a lot of what's going on with this script. It just feels like it's half-baked, full of ideas and concepts that are just reused and recycled. And there's not a lot of unique elements here. The most unique element is having the hero, the protagonist in a film like this, be disabled, and they can't even really do that justice because they still make him Mr. Superman, but this time he's got a bum leg, and it's like, that's not how it works. I'm sorry. And it doesn't help either that the family stuff is just pathetic because you never really buy the connection or the chemistry with with The Rock and his family, or it's just so painfully generic that you don't really give a shit. And ultimately, I do feel bad for Neve Campbell, who played Will's wife in this, because she's very game. She's trying. The script does try to give her a little bit more to do at times, but there's only so much that Campbell can accomplish with so little. And the kids didn't need to fucking be there. I know why the daughter is there and the other kids are there, so The Rock has something to care about or to focus on when he's trying to make his way through the skyscraper and try to stay one step ahead of the terrorists. And speaking of the terrorists, like, these villains are awful. Just really lame, one note, cardboard bad guys. They might as well be paper or cardboard cutouts at a shooting gallery. Like, they really have that much depth, and they serve the exact same purpose. I don't even remember what any of their names were, and the way that the main villain gets dispatched is honestly kind of laughable. Supposed to be this badass, and he gets taken out in a pretty ridiculous and quite easy fashion. And then you got the cast. I mean, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. Like I said earlier, a very stiff, very passionless performance, despite it being a character who's apparently supposed to be so emotional and so strong and courageous because of everything that he's been through. And it just was just one of many bad performances by The Rock, where it seems like he just is doing these films for a paycheck. I mean, I don't blame him, but at the same time, like, you could emote a little more. You could actually give more of a fuck. Neve Campbell, I would say she did a better job than The Rock, but like I said, there's really not a lot there, so she struggles at times too. Chin Han, who plays the tech entrepreneur, who's the financier of the Pearl, the skyscraper, I mean, he was there. Roland Møller, who plays the bad guy, Korez Botha, boring. Might as well be Korez bored, because they're just so bored by this bad guy. I didn't buy him as an intimidating presence. I didn't buy him as a match for The Rock. I just didn't buy him, period. Byron Mann, he's in this. The actor who played Ryu in the Street Fighter film with Jean-Claude Van Damme, he plays an inspector who's a leader of some response teams in Hong Kong. You've also got Pablo Schreiber, who is I believe, yeah, he's related to Liev Schreiber. I think I could be wrong, but I believe he is related to him. He plays Will's turncoat friend, who secretly works for the bad guy, but it's not really much of a secret at all. And you've got this chick, Hannah Quinlivan, who plays Zia, the henchwoman for Botha. Just a really unrealistic, and maybe unrealistic is not the right word, but it's one of those characters that's played by a female actress that's this supposed badass and can take on anyone, and is also a super smart hacker, and it just didn't really work for me. Maybe they're trying to go for like a Maggie Q from Live Free or Die Hard thing, but this chick couldn't even hold Maggie Q's bra straps, because she's just not even remotely a force. She seems to be the type of actress and the type of presence that could be knocked over by a stiff breeze, by a, not just a stiff breeze, by a slight breeze, like a leaf in the wind. And that's really about it. I'm not going to mention the other cast members because there's not really much to say. I mean, the two kids, McKenna Roberts, Noah Cottrell, who play Georgia and Henry Sawyer, Will's kids. I mean, I'm not going to say it's the worst performance that I've seen from a series of child actors, but it's definitely not one of the best. It's pretty much their performance is about as one known and forgettable as the rest of the movie. The cinematography by Robert Elswit, it's not excellent. At best, it's just adequate or average. The editing by Mike Sale and Julian Clark, at times, it's a little janky, and it's definitely a shaky film due to the way things are edited. I think there are some times where the editing is trying to be more ambitious in the direction, and that leads to a lot of clashes of style, and that's something that is definitely another detriment to this film's foundation and causes it to come crumbling down by the time the end credits roll. And speaking of the foundation, the skyscraper itself, at times it can be an impressive visual, but at other times it's something that looks surprisingly cheap for a film that cost as much as it did, like over $100 million. I think a lot of it is because it's just so relying upon CGI. So there's a lot of moments in the film where you're supposed to have these big, grand, epic scenes of spectacle and awe, and it's supposed to have dazzling visuals and some really impressive visual effects by Industrial Light and Magic, and it just doesn't really pan out that way. A lot of it falls very flat, and I think in large part it's due to the fact that so much of this film is so reliant upon The Rock or other characters behind a green screen. And I'm sorry, I don't care who you are, I don't care how good of an actor you are, I don't care how good the visual effects are. Most of the time that doesn't work. You can tell that they're just behind a green screen, and it definitely does take you out of things. When The Rock is jumping into CGI land, and I'm sorry, I don't really feel any suspense or tension because I can't differentiate The Rock in that scene where he's supposed to be doing his own stunts from a CGI stunt double of The Rock. Like, the film might as well be a video game. I might as well be watching a cutscene from Skyscraper, the video game, because it's such a minimal difference between the two mediums. The film features a score by a really capable composer in Steve Jablonsky, and it is one of his worst. There wasn't a single note from this score that I remembered or I wanted to hear again, and that's too bad because Steve Jablonsky, he can really bring it, and he definitely did not bring his A game here. I would say he brought his F game, because this was a pretty big giant failure of a score because it didn't do much to elevate any of the supposed excitement or intensity of scenes. It just existed. And when a score just exists and it doesn't really leave its mark, then it failed. And I definitely feel that that's the case with Steve's score here. And for a film that's 102 minutes, it feels like 202 minutes because you don't really care about a lot of the characters. The Rock plays a guy who there really isn't a lot to this guy other than he's a family man and he loves his family, and that's really it. Oh, and he's disabled. But there really isn't a ton of personality. There really isn't a ton of charm. There really isn't a reason to love this guy or root for him, and the villain isn't entertaining or enjoyable either. So a lot of the interest just comes from, hey, what does this skyscraper do? Like, what are all the bits of technology that this skyscraper employs? And that's really about it. And that's a very fleeting amount of interest. And I find it hilarious that this film has an alternate poster that is a homage to Die Hard. I because that's an insult. That is a straight up insult to Die Hard to compare yourself in any way to that film. If the movie that is trying to do that comparison is as shitty as Skyscraper. It's just one of those things that's like, what is this, a parody? Maybe this would have been better if it was a parody. If it was a Die Hard parody with The Rock and it was playing with tropes and it was being a meta dissection of the Die Hard genre film, where it's Die Hard on a battleship, or Die Hard in a carnival, or Die Hard in an amusement park, that kind of stuff. And I think that would have been interesting. That could have been a lot of fun. You could have played around with a lot of conventions and could have had some fun with it. But instead, you just have this completely useless action film because a lot of the time it just sits on its ass, just like a skyscraper, just rigid, just does not go anywhere. And it's just one of those films that you watch it once and then you forget about it seconds after you're done, because there was just nothing there to really leave that much of an impact or an impression. I don't know why this is made. If you were just going to put this less of an amount of effort into the production and into pretty much everything about the movie, then why even release this in theaters? Why even spend over $100 million on this? Why not just make it a direct-to-video movie and have it star Rob Van Dam? Like, why the fuck do you have to make this a theatrical feature? Oh, yeah. Oh, the reason why is because this was just a cheap cash grab to sucker Chinese audiences out of their money. That's why. It is a very cynical ploy, and it worked somewhat because it did wind up making over $300 million worldwide, but not enough to create a franchise, because not even the Chinese audiences wanted any more of this shit scraper. So I don't really know what else to say about Skyscraper, except it's 50 stories of pure suck. It blows like a 50-foot dick, and 50-foot dick is too that's too small. It's a 50 stories high dick, and it's just one of those films that I just have no desire to ever see again in my entire life, because it has nothing going for it other than, oh, that was kind of interesting, and that's it. I mean, The Rock needs to fire his fucking agent already. Like, choose some better fucking projects, man. There are better ways to make your money, which you probably at this point already have enough of to begin with. Maybe raise your standards to Skyscraper levels, Dwayne, so you don't star in shit like this. Anyway, thank you for watching my rant on Skyscraper, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.